The coffee mug shattered against the kitchen wall, sending ceramic shards across the marble countertop like tiny white missiles. Beth stood there, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at Lisa, who was calmly buttering toast at my breakfast table. "Who the hell is this woman in our house?" Beth screamed, her voice cracking with the kind of hysteria that made our neighbors peek through their blinds. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment I'd been planning for exactly 14 days. "Her name is Lisa," I said, my voice steady as granite. "She's my girlfriend. You remember what girlfriends are, right? People who actually want to spend time with you." Beth's face went through about 6 different shades of red before settling on a color that reminded me of overcooked lobster. "Girlfriend? Gabe, what the hell are you talking about? I've been gone for 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find yourself," I corrected, setting down my mug with deliberate precision. "Funny thing about that, Beth. Turns out, while you were busy finding yourself, I found a few things too. Let me back up a bit. My name is Gabe Parrish, and 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty good life. 41 years old, owner of Parrish Electric, the most successful electrical contracting business in our suburb of Millfield Heights. Nice house, 2 great daughters, and what I thought was a solid marriage to Beth, my wife of 16 years. The cracks started showing about 6 months ago. Beth began working late, taking mysterious phone calls in the other room, and developing a sudden interest in yoga classes that seemed to run until midnight. I'm not stupid. I've wired enough houses to know when circuits are shorting out. The final straw came when she asked for those 2 weeks. "I need space, Gabe," she'd said, standing in our bedroom with a suitcase that looked suspiciously well-packed for a spontaneous decision. "I need to figure out who I am outside of being your wife." I'd agreed, of course. What else could I do? But I'm an electrician. I know how to trace problems back to their source. It took me exactly 3 days to find out where Beth was finding herself. My business partner, John Casey's lakeside condo, to be specific. John, who'd been my best friend since high school. John, who was best man at our wedding. John, who'd been coming to our barbecues and Christmas dinners for 16 years, always making jokes about what a lucky bastard I was to have Beth. Turns out he wasn't joking. The private investigator I hired, a guy named Stan, who used to be a cop before he got tired of dealing with paperwork, brought me photos that made everything crystal clear. Beth and John at romantic dinners. Beth and John walking hand in hand along the lake. Beth and John in positions that definitely weren't covered in any yoga manual I'd ever seen. "Your wife's been taking private lessons," Stan had said, sliding the envelope across the table at Murphy's bar. "And your business partner's been a very dedicated instructor." That's when I started planning. See, most guys in my situation would have called a lawyer, filed for divorce, and tried to take Beth for everything she was worth. But I'm not most guys. I'm the kind of guy who spent 20 years building a business from nothing, who learned that the best revenge isn't getting mad, it's getting even in a way that leaves your enemies wondering what the hell just hit them. So while Beth was busy finding herself, I was busy finding Lisa. Lisa Martinez was our new neighbor, a 35-year-old nurse who'd moved in across the street after her divorce. Pretty in a natural way that didn't require 2 hours of makeup every morning. Smart, funny, and refreshingly honest about what she wanted from life. We'd started talking over the fence while I was fixing her electrical outlet, a job I'd volunteered for the day after I got Stan's photos. "Your wife's been gone for a week," Lisa had observed, watching me work. "Everything okay?" "She's finding herself," I'd replied, not looking up from the wiring. Apparently, she lost herself somewhere around my business partner's bedroom. Lisa had laughed, not the fake, polite laugh most people give when they don't know what to say, but a genuine, surprised laugh that made me remember why I used to enjoy talking to women. One thing led to another. Coffee. Dinner. Long conversations about what we actually wanted from life instead of what we thought we were supposed to want. By the time Beth's 2 weeks were up, Lisa and I had developed what you might generously call a relationship. Which brings us back to this morning, with Beth standing in my kitchen like an avenging angel who'd gotten lost on the way to someone else's apocalypse. "You can't just replace me!" Beth shrieked, her voice climbing octaves like a fire truck siren. "We're married! We have children!" "Had children," I corrected. "Beau and Bree are at my mother's house. They don't need to see this particular episode of When Cheating Wives Attack." Beth's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Cheating? What are you talking about? I told you, I needed space to screw my business partner in his lakeside love nest," I finished. "Yeah, I got the memo, along with about 50 photos that tell the whole heartwarming story." The color drained from Beth's face faster than water down a broken drain. "You had me followed?" "I had my suspicions confirmed," I said, standing up from the table. "There's a difference. One makes you paranoid, the other makes you prepared." Lisa, who'd been watching this exchange with the calm professionalism of someone who'd seen plenty of family drama in her nursing career, finally spoke up. "Maybe I should go," she said, starting to rise from her chair. "No," I said firmly, putting a hand on her shoulder. "You belong here. Beth doesn't. Not anymore." Beth's face went through another color change, this time settling on a shade of purple that suggested either extreme rage or an impending stroke. "How dare you? This is my house." "Actually," I said, reaching into my jacket pocket and pulling out a folded document, "according to this restraining order, it's not. Turns out, when you abandon your marital home to shack up with your husband's business partner, you lose certain privileges, like the right to burst in here screaming at 7 in the morning. Beth stared at the paper like it was written in ancient Sanskrit. "Restraining order, you can't." "I can, and I did. Signed by Judge Morrison yesterday afternoon. You've got 30 minutes to collect your personal items, and then you need to stay at least 500 feet away from this property." I smiled, the kind of smile that probably looked more like a shark showing its teeth. "Don't worry, though. I'm sure John has plenty of room for your stuff at his place." That's when Beth made her first big mistake. Instead of cutting her losses and walking away with what dignity she had left, she decided to double down. "You bastard!" she hissed, stepping toward me with her hands clenched into fists. "You think you can just throw away 16 years of marriage because of some misunderstanding?" "Misunderstanding?" I laughed, a sound with about as much humor as a funeral dirge. "Beth, I've got photos of you and John in positions that would make a contortionist jealous. The only thing I misunderstood was thinking you had enough class to end our marriage before starting your next one." Beth's hand came up fast, aiming for my face with the kind of slap that's meant to reset someone's attitude. But I've been dodging flying objects in construction sites for 20 years. I caught her wrist 6 inches from my cheek. "That," I said quietly, "would be assault, in front of a witness, while you're already violating a restraining order." I released her hand and stepped back. "You want to add jail time to your list of problems today?" Beth stared at me like she was seeing a stranger, which I suppose she was. The Gabe she'd married was the kind of guy who would have taken her back, forgiven the affair, and spent the next 10 years pretending it never happened while she lost respect for him a little more each day. This Gabe had learned a few things during her 2-week absence. 29 minutes, I said, glancing at my watch. "Clock's ticking." Beth stormed upstairs to pack her things, her heels clicking against the hardwood like angry woodpeckers. Lisa and I sat in the kitchen, listening to drawers slamming and what sounded like a small furniture store being rearranged. "This is going to get ugly, isn't it?" Lisa asked, her nursing instincts probably picking up on the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "It already is ugly," I replied, refilling my coffee cup. "Now it's just going to get public." The truth was, I'd been planning for this moment since the day I hired Stan. See, most people think revenge is about getting angry and doing something stupid, but real revenge, the kind that actually works, requires patience, planning, and a thorough understanding of your enemy's weaknesses. Beth's biggest weakness had always been her need to be seen as the victim. Even when she was clearly in the wrong, she had this talent for twisting situations until she came out looking like the injured party. It had worked for years, mainly because I'd been too focused on keeping the peace to call her on it. But this time was different. This time, I had documentation. Stan had done more than just take pictures. He'd tracked Beth's credit card purchases, mapped out her daily routine, and even managed to record a few conversations between her and John that would have made a sailor blush. All of it perfectly legal. Beth had used our joint credit cards for her affair, and she'd had most of her phone calls in public places where there was no expectation of privacy. The best part was the timeline. According to Stan's investigation, Beth and John had been planning this for months. They'd looked at apartments together. They'd discussed how to divide up the business assets. They'd even talked about what they'd tell my daughters about why Daddy wasn't going to be around anymore. That last part had really sealed the deal for me. "Gabe!" Beth's voice echoed down from upstairs, carrying the kind of fury that suggested she'd just discovered something unpleasant. "Where are my jewelry boxes?" "Safe deposit box," I called back, "along with anything else that might be considered marital assets. My lawyer thought it would be best to secure everything until the divorce proceedings are finalized." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator humming. Then came the sound of feet on stairs, moving fast. Beth appeared in the kitchen doorway holding an empty jewelry box, like evidence in a murder trial. "You stole my jewelry?" "I secured marital assets that were at risk of disappearing," I corrected. "There's a difference. One's theft, the other's smart financial planning." "Those were gifts, anniversary presents, birthday gifts. Purchased with marital funds during our marriage," I interrupted, "which makes them marital property subject to division during divorce proceedings. Don't worry, you'll get your fair share. Assuming you can prove you didn't use any of it to finance your affair." Beth's face went through its now familiar color progression, settling on a shade that reminded me of a ripe tomato. "You can't prove anything." I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a photo Stan had taken 3 days ago. Beth and John at Chez Laurent, the most expensive restaurant in town. Beth was wearing her diamond anniversary earrings, the ones I'd given her for our 15th wedding anniversary last year. "Funny story," I said, showing her the photo. "Those earrings cost me $3,000. The dinner you and John had while you were wearing them cost $450. John paid with his credit card, but I'm betting if we dig deep enough, we'll find some interesting financial connections." Beth stared at the photo like it was a snake that had just offered her an apple. "How did you get pictures of your romantic dinner?" "Professional photographer. Turns out when you hire someone who used to work for the police, they know all sorts of interesting techniques for gathering evidence." That's when Beth made her second big mistake. Instead of realizing she was outgunned and outmaneuvered, she decided to go on the attack. "You're sick," she said, her voice dropping to the kind of whisper that's supposed to be more threatening than shouting. "Following me around, taking pictures, spying on me like some kind of stalker. No wonder I needed to get away from you." Lisa, who'd been quietly observing this exchange, finally spoke up. "Actually, that's called gathering evidence of adultery. It's perfectly legal, and it's usually necessary when one's spouse is lying about their activities." Beth turned on Lisa with the kind of look that could have melted steel. "And who asked you? What kind of woman moves in on a married man?" "The kind who was told by that married man that his wife had abandoned their home to live with another man," Lisa replied calmly. "The kind who saw the evidence before making any decisions. The kind who actually cares about the truth." "Truth?" Beth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You want the truth? The truth is that Gabe is a controlling, paranoid, emotionally distant workaholic who hasn't paid attention to me in years. The truth is that I was lonely and neglected, and yes, I made a mistake. But that doesn't give him the right to..." "To what?" I interrupted. "To expect honesty from my wife? To assume that when you said you needed space, you meant space instead of John Casey's bedroom? To think that 16 years of marriage earned me at least a conversation before you decided to audition for his replacement? Beth's mouth opened and closed again, but no sound came out. She was running out of ammunition, and we both knew it. 18 minutes, I said, glancing at my watch again. That's when the doorbell rang. I walked to the front door, already knowing who I'd find there. John Casey stood on my porch, looking like a man who'd gotten dressed in a hurry. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had the kind of nervous energy that suggested he'd been drinking coffee for the past 3 hours. "Gabe," he said as I opened the door. "We need to talk." "No," I replied. "We really don't." "Come on, man. This whole situation is just a big misunderstanding. Beth and I, we were just screwing each other senseless while planning to destroy my family and steal my business," I finished. "Yeah, I heard about that. Fascinating stuff. You should write a book. How to Betray Your Best Friend in 50 Easy Steps." John's face went pale. "How did you find out?" "Same way I found out about the apartment you two looked at on Elm Street. Same way I found out about your plans to buy me out of the business using money you've been skimming from our accounts. Same way I found out about the conversation you had with Beth about getting custody of my daughters so you could play house with my family." John stepped backward, like I'd just told him he had a terminal disease. "Gabe, you don't understand. It's not what it looks like. It looks like my business partner and my wife decided to betray me in every way possible while pretending to be concerned about my well-being," I said. "If that's not what it is, then you've got about 30 seconds to explain what it actually is." John opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. No sound came out. He looked like a fish trying to breathe air. "That's what I thought," I said. "You've got 15 minutes to get Beth and get off my property. After that, I call the police." "The police? Gabe, come on, we're friends." "We're friends," I corrected. Past tense. Now you're just the guy who's been stealing from me and sleeping with my wife. Big difference. I closed the door in his face and walked back to the kitchen, where Beth was having what appeared to be a complete nervous breakdown. "He's here, isn't he?" she asked, her voice shaking. "John's here?" "He's here to collect you," I said. "You've got 15 minutes to finish packing and get out. I suggest you use them wisely." Beth stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, trying to find some angle, some way to turn this situation to her advantage. But there wasn't one. I'd been too thorough, too careful, too patient. "This isn't over," she said finally. "Yes," I replied. "It is." Beth and John left my house that morning like two kids who'd been caught stealing candy, all nervous glances and whispered conversations. I watched from the kitchen window as they loaded Beth's hastily packed suitcases into John's BMW, noting how they both kept looking back at the house like they expected me to come running after them with apologies and forgiveness. They were going to be disappointed. Lisa squeezed my hand as we watched them drive away. "You okay?" "Better than I've been in months," I said, and meant it. "You want some breakfast?" "Real breakfast. Not the toast and coffee routine we just had." "Shouldn't you be upset?" she asked. "I mean, your marriage just ended." "My marriage ended 6 months ago," I replied, pulling eggs and bacon from the refrigerator. "I just didn't get the memo until 2 weeks ago." The truth was, I felt lighter than I had in years. All those months of suspicion, of wondering if I was being paranoid, of second-guessing every instinct, all of that was over. Now I knew exactly where I stood, and more importantly, I knew exactly what I was going to do about it. My phone rang while I was scrambling eggs. Dana Morrison, my lawyer, calling with an update. "The restraining order is in effect," she said without preamble. Dana didn't believe in small talk, which was one of the reasons I'd hired her. "Beth can't come within 500 feet of your house, your business, or your daughter's school. How did she take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. She threatened me, tried to slap me, and generally acted like a woman who'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Good. Document everything. The more unreasonable she acts, the stronger our position becomes. Dana paused, and I heard papers rustling. Speaking of which, I've got some interesting news about your business partner. John? What about him? Remember how you suspected he'd been skimming money? Well, my forensic accountant found some very interesting discrepancies in your business accounts. It looks like Mr. Casey has been supplementing his income for quite some time. I stopped stirring the eggs. How much are we talking about? Preliminary estimate? About $40,000 over the past 18 months. All of it moved through a series of dummy invoices for work that was never performed. Very sophisticated, very deliberate, and very illegal. $40,000. That was enough to finance a lot of romantic dinners and weekend getaways. It was also enough to land John in serious legal trouble. What are my options? I asked. Several. We can file criminal charges, which would probably result in prosecution for embezzlement. We can pursue civil remedies, which would get your money back, but wouldn't involve jail time. Or we can use this information as leverage to force a very favorable buyout of his share of the business. I thought about that while I finished making breakfast. John owned 40% of Parish Electric, a share he'd earned through 15 years of partnership and friendship. But that was before he'd decided to steal my money and my wife. What would you recommend? I asked. Depends on what you want more, justice or revenge. What's the difference? Dana laughed, a sound like ice cubes clinking in a glass. Justice is getting your money back and seeing him punished according to the law. Revenge is making sure he loses everything that matters to him while you come out ahead. And if I wanted revenge? Then we'd arrange a meeting with Mr. Casey and present him with a choice. He can buy out your 60% of the business at fair market value, about $400,000, or we can file criminal charges and let him explain to a jury why he thought it was okay to steal from his best friend. $400,000. That was enough to start over, to build something new, to give my daughters the kind of security that didn't depend on trusting people who'd already proven they couldn't be trusted. Set up the meeting, I said. I was hoping you'd say that. After I hung up, Lisa and I ate breakfast in comfortable silence. It was amazing how peaceful the house felt without Beth's constant undercurrent of dissatisfaction and restlessness. No dramatic sighs, no passive-aggressive comments about how I never paid attention to her, no sudden mood changes that turned simple conversations into emotional minefields. Can I ask you something? Lisa said as we finished eating. Shoot. Why aren't you more angry? I mean, I know you're handling this strategically, but most people would be furious, screaming, throwing things, plotting elaborate revenge schemes. I thought about that for a moment. You know what the difference is between a good electrician and a bad one? What? A bad electrician gets angry when a circuit shorts out. He starts yanking wires and cursing and making a bigger mess. A good electrician stays calm, traces the problem back to its source, and fixes it properly so it doesn't happen again. Lisa smiled. And Beth was a short circuit? Beth was a symptom. The real problem was that I'd been ignoring warning signs for months, hoping things would get better on their own. But electrical problems don't fix themselves. They just get worse until something burns down. My phone buzzed with a text message. From John. We need to talk. This is getting out of hand. I showed the message to Lisa. Looks like someone's starting to panic. Are you going to respond? Eventually, but not yet. Let him sweat for a while. People make better decisions when they're scared. The rest of the morning was blissfully quiet. Lisa and I talked about normal things, her work at the hospital, my plans for the business, what we wanted to do for dinner. It was the kind of easy, comfortable conversation I'd forgotten was possible between two adults who actually liked each other. Around noon, my mother called to check on the girls. Ruth Parrish was 72 years old, built like a sparrow, and had the emotional durability of a steel beam. She'd raised 4 boys after my father died in a construction accident, and she didn't have much patience for drama. "How are Beau and Bree handling things?" I asked. "Better than I expected. They're smart girls, Gabe. They knew something was wrong before you did." "What do you mean?" "Beau told me Beth had been acting strange for months, coming home late, being secretive about phone calls, snapping at them for no reason. Kids notice things adults think they're hiding." That hit me harder than I'd expected. I'd been so focused on protecting my daughters from the truth about their mother that I'd missed the fact that they'd already figured it out on their own. "Do they know about John?" "They suspected. Bree saw him at the house one afternoon when you were at work, and Beth thought the girls were at school. She came home sick and found them together." I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because she's 13 years old, and she was hoping she was wrong. She's been carrying that secret for 2 months, Gabe. She's relieved it's finally out in the open." 2 months. My 13-year-old daughter had been protecting me from the truth about my marriage for 2 months, while I'd been stumbling around in denial. "Can I talk to them?" "They're at the park with some friends, but they'll be back for dinner. Why don't you and Lisa come over? It's time they met her properly." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, thinking about how badly I'd misjudged everything. I thought I was protecting my daughters by keeping the truth from them. Instead, I'd been forcing them to protect me by keeping the truth from me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from John. "Gabe, please. We've been friends for 20 years. Don't throw that away over a misunderstanding." This time I responded, "Meet me at the office tomorrow at 9 a.m. Come alone. Bring your checkbook." His reply came back almost immediately. "What's this about?" I typed back, "You'll find out tomorrow." Then I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the day learning what it felt like to be happy in my own house again. The next morning, I arrived at the parish electric offices 30 minutes early. I wanted to be settled, calm, and completely prepared when John walked through that door. Dana had briefed me on exactly what to say and how to say it. This wasn't going to be an emotional confrontation between 2 former friends. This was going to be a business transaction. John showed up at exactly 9 o'clock, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled. Wrinkled shirt, unshaven face, hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it all night. He was carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man walking to his own execution. "Gabe," he said as he entered my office. "Thanks for agreeing to meet." "Sit down, John." He took the chair across from my desk, the same chair he'd sat in hundreds of times over the years when we'd planned jobs, discussed business strategy, or just talked about our lives. But this time was different. This time there was a lawyer sitting in the corner taking notes, and a folder full of evidence sitting on my desk. "I brought some papers," John said, opening his folder with shaking hands. "Legal documents that explain everything. Beth and we never meant for this to happen. It just—" "John," I interrupted. "Shut up and listen." He stopped talking, his mouth hanging slightly open. "We're not here to discuss your relationship with my wife," I continued. "We're here to discuss your theft from our business." The color drained from John's face like water from a broken pipe. "Theft? Gabe? What are you talking about?" I opened the folder on my desk and pulled out a stack of papers. $43,726. That's how much you've stolen from Parish Electric over the past 18 months. John stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "I don't know what you're talking about." Dummy invoices for electrical work that was never performed, payments to subcontractors who don't exist, equipment purchases that never happened. All of it funneled through accounts that you control. I slid the papers across the desk. My forensic accountant was very thorough. John picked up the papers with hands that were visibly shaking. As he read, his face went through several color changes, finally settling on a shade of gray that suggested he was either about to throw up or pass out. This is all a misunderstanding, he said finally. These payments, they were for financing your affair with my wife, I finished. Romantic dinners, weekend getaways, the security deposit on that apartment you two looked at on Elm Street, all paid for with money you stole from our business. John set the papers down and looked at me with the expression of a man who'd just realized he was standing in quicksand. Gabe, we can work this out. We've been partners for 15 years. We were partners. Past tense. Now you're just a thief who used to be my friend. What do you want? I want you to buy me out of the business. Fair market value, which according to our most recent appraisal, is $650,000. Your 40% comes to $260,000. You'll pay me the remaining $390,000, plus the $43,000 you stole, plus interest and penalties. Total amount due, $450,000. John's mouth fell open. $450,000? Gabe, I don't have that kind of money. Then you'd better find it, because the alternative is criminal charges for embezzlement, which carries a potential sentence of up to 10 years in prison. You can't be serious. I leaned back in my chair and studied John's face. This was the man who'd been my best friend for 20 years. The man who'd been best man at my wedding. The man who'd held my daughters when they were babies and taught them how to ride bicycles and told them bedtime stories when Beth and I went out for date nights. This was also the man who'd been systematically stealing from me while planning to destroy my marriage and take custody of my children. Dead serious, I said. You've got 48 hours to come up with the money. After that, I file criminal charges. John stood up so fast his chair fell backward. This is insane. You're destroying both our lives over a mistake. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. You already did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. And what about Beth? What happens to her in all this? Beth gets what she wanted, freedom to be with you. Of course, she'll be doing it without any of my money, any claim to my business, or any custody of my daughters. But hey, at least you two will have each other. John stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to process the reality of his situation. He'd gambled everything on the assumption that I'd never find out about the affair, and even if I did, I'd be too weak or too forgiving to do anything about it. He'd miscalculated badly. 48 hours, I repeated. The clock starts now. John left my office without another word, but I could hear him making phone calls in the parking lot. Desperate phone calls to banks, to lawyers, to anyone who might be able to help him come up with $450,000 in 2 days. Good luck with that. After he was gone, Dana emerged from the corner where she'd been taking notes. That went well. Think he'll pay? He doesn't have a choice. The evidence is overwhelming, and he knows it. He'll probably have to mortgage everything he owns, but he'll pay. And if he doesn't, then he goes to prison, and you still get the business. Either way, you win. That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house to pick up Beau and Bree. It was time to have the conversation I'd been dreading, explaining to my daughters why their mother wouldn't be living with us anymore. But as it turned out, they already knew most of the story. Dad, Beau said as we sat in my mother's living room, we're not little kids anymore. We know Mom was cheating on you with Uncle John. Uncle John. That's what they'd always called him, the man who'd been like family to us for 20 years. How long have you known? I asked. A couple of months, Bree admitted. I saw them together when I came home sick from school. They didn't see me, but I saw them. Why didn't you tell me? Beau and Bree exchanged a look that was far too mature for their ages. Because we hoped you'd figure it out on your own, Beau said, and because we didn't want to be the ones to hurt you. I felt my throat tighten. My daughters, 15 and 13 years old, had been trying to protect me from the truth about my own marriage. I'm sorry, I said. You shouldn't have had to carry that secret. It's okay, Dad, Bree said. We just want you to be happy, and Mom hasn't been happy for a long time. Maybe this is better for everyone. What about Lisa? Beau asked. Are you going to marry her? I don't know, I said honestly. It's too soon to think about that. But I like her a lot. And she likes you too. Good, Beau said. Because Mom never really liked us. She loved us because she was supposed to, but she never actually liked us. That observation, delivered with the casual brutality that only teenagers can manage, hit me like a punch to the gut. Because it was true. Beth had always seen motherhood as a duty rather than a joy. She'd gone through the motions, school events, birthday parties, family dinners, but there had always been an undercurrent of resentment, as if the girls were obstacles to the life she really wanted. Well, I said, Lisa likes you, and I like Lisa, and we all like each other. That's a pretty good start. Better than Mom and Uncle John, Bree observed. They don't even like each other. They just like the idea of being together. Out of the mouths of babes. That evening, Lisa and I took the girls out to dinner at their favorite restaurant. It was the first time the four of us had eaten together as a family, and I was nervous about how it would go. But I needn't have worried. Lisa had a natural ease with teenagers that Beth had never possessed. She listened to their stories, laughed at their jokes, and treated them like actual people rather than miniature adults who needed to be managed. This is nice, Beau said as we walked back to the car. It feels normal. Normal. That was exactly what it felt like. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I was part of a real family instead of a collection of people who happened to live in the same house. My phone buzzed with a text message. From John. I need more time. This is impossible. I showed the message to Lisa. What do you think? I think he's panicking, she said. Which means your plan is working. I typed back, 48 hours, not 49. His response came immediately. Please, I'm begging you. Too late for begging, I replied. Should have thought of that before you decided to steal from me and sleep with my wife. Then I turned off my phone and spent the rest of the evening being a father to my daughters and a boyfriend to a woman who actually wanted to be with me. For the first time in years, life felt like it was moving in the right direction. John showed up at my office the next morning looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands were shaking, and he had the desperate energy of a man who'd spent the entire night trying to solve an impossible puzzle. I can't do it, he said without preamble. I can't come up with $450,000 in 24 hours. It's impossible. Then I guess we're done here, I replied, reaching for my phone. Dana, it's Gabe. Go ahead and file the criminal charges. Wait, John practically shouted. Wait, please. There has to be another way. I paused with my finger over the phone. I'm listening. What if I sign over my 40% of the business to you? Just give it to you, free and clear. That's worth $260,000. And I'll pay you back the money I took with interest. I'll sign a promissory note, set up a payment plan. John, I interrupted. Do you think I'm stupid? What? Do you think I'm so stupid that I'd trust you to make payments on a debt when you've already proven you're a thief? Do you think I'd want to be tied to you financially for the next 10 years while you slowly pay me back money you stole from me in the first place? John's face crumpled. Then what do you want me to do? I want you to come up with $450,000 today, or I want you to go to prison. Those are your options. I can't. Then you've made your choice. I started to dial Dana's number again, but John grabbed my wrist. Please, Gabe, I know I screwed up. I know I betrayed you. But we were friends for 20 years. That has to count for something. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then up at his face. You want to know what 20 years of friendship is worth, John? Yes. It's worth me giving you 48 hours notice instead of calling the police the day I found out you were stealing from me. That's it. That's what 20 years of friendship bought you. John released my wrist and sank into his chair like a deflated balloon. You've changed, Gabe. The man I knew would never. The man you knew was naive enough to trust his wife and his best friend, I finished. That man learned some hard lessons over the past few weeks. This is who he became. John sat in silence for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, there was something different in his eyes, something harder. Fine, he said. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. What's that supposed to mean? It means Beth and I have been talking to lawyers too. It means we know about your little relationship with the neighbor. It means we know you've been planning this revenge scheme for weeks while pretending to be the injured party. I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious. And juries don't like vindictive husbands who set up elaborate revenge plots. They especially don't like vindictive husbands who start new relationships before their divorces are finalized. Beth's lawyer thinks she can get custody of the girls and half of everything you own. I smiled. Is that what Beth's lawyer thinks? That's what he guaranteed. Interesting. What else did he guarantee? John's confidence faltered slightly. What do you mean? I mean, did he guarantee those things before or after he saw the photos of Beth wearing her anniversary jewelry to romantic dinners with you? Did he guarantee them before or after he learned about the apartment you two looked at while planning to take custody of my children? Did he guarantee them before or after he found out about the $43,000 you stole to finance your affair? John's face went pale again. How did you know about the apartment? Know about your financial records? Know about Beth's plans for the girls? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out another folder, this one twice as thick as the first. Because I've been thorough, John. Very, very thorough. I opened the folder and began pulling out documents. Here's the application you and Beth filled out for the apartment on Elm Street. Here are the bank records showing you used stolen money for the security deposit. Here are the text messages between you and Beth discussing how to get custody of Beau and Bree so you could play house with my family. With each document, John shrank further into his chair. Here's my personal favorite, I continued, pulling out a transcript. A recording of the conversation you and Beth had at Murphy's bar 3 weeks ago, where you discussed how to manipulate me into agreeing to a divorce that would leave me with nothing. John stared at the transcript like it was a death warrant. That's illegal. You can't record people without their consent. Actually, I can. Murphy's bar is a public place with no expectation of privacy. The recording is completely legal and completely admissible in court. I leaned forward, enjoying the look of complete defeat on John's face. So here's what's really going to happen. Beth's lawyer is going to take one look at this evidence and advise her to take whatever settlement I'm willing to offer. You're going to come up with $450,000 or go to prison, and I'm going to end up with my business, my house, custody of my daughters, and a clean conscience. You bastard, John whispered. No, I replied. I'm just a guy who learned not to trust people who've already betrayed him once. John stood up slowly like an old man with arthritis. You'll regret this, Gabe. Someday you'll regret destroying people who cared about you. People who cared about me don't steal from me and sleep with my wife, I said. People who cared about me don't plan to take custody of my children so they can play house with my family. People who cared about me don't spend months plotting to destroy my life while pretending to be my friend. John walked to the door, then turned back. What happened to you? You used to be a good man. I'm still a good man, I replied. I'm just not a stupid one anymore. After John left, I sat in my office thinking about his question. What had happened to me? When had I become the kind of person who could systematically destroy 2 people's lives without feeling guilty about it? The answer was simple. I'd become that person the moment I realized that the 2 most important people in my life had been systematically betraying me for months, while I'd been naive enough to trust them. Beth and John had made their choices. Now, they were living with the consequences. My phone rang. Dana, calling with an update. John's lawyer just called, she said. They want to negotiate. What kind of negotiation? They're offering to sign over John's share of the business and pay restitution for the stolen money over a 5-year period. Counter offer, I said. Full payment within 30 days, or criminal charges. That's pretty harsh, Gabe. So is stealing from your best friend while sleeping with his wife. Dana was quiet for a moment. You know, when you first came to me, I thought you were just another angry husband looking for revenge. But this isn't about revenge anymore, is it? What do you mean? I mean, you're not trying to hurt them. You're trying to make sure they can never hurt you again. There's a difference. She was right. This wasn't about making Beth and John suffer. It was about making sure that when this was all over, they'd have no power to disrupt my life or my daughter's lives ever again. 30 days, I repeated. Not 31. I'll make the call. That afternoon, I picked up Beau and Bree from school and took them home to a house that finally felt like it belonged to us. Lisa was in the kitchen making dinner, humming to herself while she cooked. It was such a normal, domestic scene that it took my breath away. How was school? I asked the girls. Weird, Beau said. Mom showed up during lunch and tried to talk to us. I felt my stomach tighten. What did she say? She wanted us to come stay with her and Uncle John, Bree said. She said you were being mean to them and that we'd be happier living with them. What did you tell her? We told her we're happy where we are, Beau said. We told her we want to stay with you and Lisa. How did she take that? Beau and Bree exchanged another one of those two mature looks. Not well, Bree said. She started crying and saying we didn't understand how much she loved us. Do you want to see her? I asked. I mean, she's still your mother. If you want to spend time with her. Not really, Beau said. Maybe someday when she's not so crazy. But right now, we just want things to be normal. Normal. There was that word again. That evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Lisa and I sat on the back porch drinking wine and talking about the future. For the first time in months, I actually had a future worth discussing. What happens next? She asked. John pays up or goes to prison. Beth signs the divorce papers and moves on with her life. The girls and I figure out how to be a family again. And us? I looked at Lisa. Really looked at her. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. She was kind without being weak, strong without being hard, honest without being cruel. She was everything Beth had never been. I'd like there to be an us, I said. If you're interested? She smiled. I'm interested. Good, because I think my daughters are getting attached to you. Just your daughters? I leaned over and kissed her, tasting wine and possibility, and the promise of a life that didn't involve walking on eggshells or wondering what crisis would erupt next. Not just my daughters, I said. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Beth. Please call me. We need to talk. I showed the message to Lisa. What do you think? I stared at the last message on the screen until the letters stopped looking like words and started looking like a tactic. Beth had always known which buttons to press, and the girls was the biggest one, because it carried an implication that any resistance to her was cruelty, any boundary was selfishness. It was the same move she'd used for years whenever she wanted to turn the conversation away from what she'd done and toward what I supposedly owed her. But the difference now was that I could see the move as a move, not as truth. I think she's realizing that her plan didn't work out the way she expected, Lisa said quietly from the other side of the deck table, swirling the last of her wine in the glass like she was thinking through the angles. I typed back, "Talk to my lawyer." Her response came immediately. "This is about the girls. They need their mother." I felt the familiar tug for half a second. The old instinct to soften, to compromise, to create peace, even if it meant swallowing something sharp. Then I glanced through the glass door at the living room, where the girls' backpacks were lined up neatly by the couch, and at the hallway where their bedroom doors were closed. where the house had finally gone quiet in a way that felt safe instead of lonely. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was protection. "They have their mother," I replied. "They just don't want to live with her." The phone stayed silent after that, not because Beth had suddenly found humility, but because she'd run out of angles that didn't expose her. If she pushed harder, she'd have to explain why the girls didn't want to live with her, and explaining that truth would require admitting she'd chosen chaos over stability, fantasy over family, and she wasn't ready to say those words out loud. People who live on narratives avoid facts like they're poison. Lisa watched me set the phone face down on the table and reached for my hand, not squeezing, not making a big moment out of it, just touching like she was reminding my nervous system that the fight didn't have to enter the house. Her presence had a strange effect on me. It didn't erase what happened. It just kept me from spiraling into the old reflex of trying to control everything with more effort. "You did good," she said softly. "I did necessary," I replied, and I meant it. There was no pride in what I'd typed, no thrill in refusing Beth. Just a calm line drawn in permanent ink. It was the kind of boundary that used to scare me, because it meant someone would be angry, and I'd spent years managing other people's anger like it was a full-time job. Now, anger didn't frighten me as much as manipulation did, and Beth's message had been manipulation dressed in motherhood. We finished our wine slowly, the cool night air settling around us, the last of the storm clouds breaking apart and drifting away like they were losing interest in us. The yard smelled damp and clean, and the porch light cast a warm circle that made the deck feel like its own little world, separated from the rest of the mess. Somewhere down the street a dog barked once and then stopped. The world had that post-storm quiet, like everything was taking a breath. I thought about Beth sitting in some motel room or borrowed couch, staring at her own phone, waiting for me to soften, waiting for me to panic, waiting for me to offer her a way back into the life she'd burned down. And I realized she wasn't missing the girls the way a mother misses her children. She was missing control. She was missing the role. She was missing the ability to walk into this house and make it spin around her moods. Lisa stood first and collected the empty glasses, and I followed her inside, shutting the sliding door behind us and locking it out of habit. The click of the lock felt symbolic, not because I was shutting Beth out physically, but because I was shutting the old pattern out. The pattern where Beth's chaos dictated our weather, the pattern where I kept making room for her storms. The house was finally truly ours. The living room looked the same as it always had, same furniture, same photos, same shelves, but it felt different. It felt claimed, like someone had finally removed the tension from the walls. Lisa set the glasses in the sink and paused for a moment, looking around, as if she could feel the shift, too. She wasn't trying to replace Beth in the way people assume when they see a new woman in an old home. She was simply inhabiting the present, and that was something Beth had never been able to do. Beth always lived in the next thrill, the next plan, the next fantasy. Tomorrow would bring more calls from lawyers, more emails, more documents with headings and deadlines. There would be court dates, custody discussions, and probably one last attempt from John to negotiate, to barter, to claim he deserved something he hadn't earned. Beth would probably try again, too, with a softer message, or a crueler one, or a message designed to look cooperative so she could screenshot it later. People like her don't stop when they lose. They change masks. But tonight, the girls were asleep down the hall, safe and tucked in, their breathing steady and innocent in a house that wasn't filled with arguments anymore. Tonight, there was a woman in my kitchen who wasn't here for leverage, wasn't here to win, wasn't here to perform. She was here because she wanted to be. Lisa came back into the living room and leaned against my shoulder for a moment, her hair still faintly smelling like rain and shampoo, and I felt something unclench again, deeper this time. Not the kind of relief that comes from victory, but the kind that comes from finally being able to stop bracing. For the first time in years, The things I'd always thought were too small to matter. Quiet, routine, warmth, someone's hand on my arm, felt like the only things that actually did. I turned off the lights one by one as we headed toward bed, and the house settled into darkness like it was settling into peace. Before we reached the stairs, I glanced once more at the phone on the table, face down and silent, and I felt grateful for that silence. Not because Beth had stopped, but because I had. Because boundaries aren't about changing someone else. They're about deciding who gets access to your life. Tonight, Beth didn't. Tonight, I was home with my daughters and a woman who actually wanted to be there. And for the first time in years, that felt like enough. 3 weeks later, John came up with the money. I never found out exactly how he managed it, whether he mortgaged everything he owned, borrowed from family, or sold a kidney on the black market. But at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, he walked into Dana's office with a certified check for $450,000. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck, then backed over for good measure. His face was gaunt, his clothes hung loose on his frame, and his hands shook as he signed the papers transferring his share of the business to me. "There," he said, sliding the documents across the table. "Are you satisfied?" "I'm satisfied that justice has been served," I replied. "Whether I'm happy about it is a different question." "And what's the answer to that question?" I thought about it for a moment. "I'm happy that my daughters are safe. I'm happy that my business is secure. I'm happy that I don't have to wonder what you and Beth are plotting behind my back anymore." I paused. "But I'm not happy that it came to this." John stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "You're not happy? You just destroyed my life." "No," I said quietly. "You destroyed your life. I just refused to let you destroy mine, too." After John left, presumably to start over somewhere else with whatever dignity he had left, Dana and I finished the paperwork that made me the sole owner of Parish Electric. "How does it feel?" she asked as I signed the final documents. "Expensive," I said, "but worth it. Any regrets?" I thought about that question as I drove home. Did I regret the end of a 20-year friendship? Yes. Did I regret the end of a 16-year marriage? In some ways. Did I regret the methods I'd used to protect myself and my daughters? Not for a second. Beth had signed the divorce papers the week before, agreeing to a settlement that gave her almost nothing. According to Dana, Beth's lawyer had taken one look at the evidence against her and advised her to take whatever deal I was willing to offer. She got her personal belongings, her car, and enough money to start over somewhere else. Everything else, the house, the business, custody of the girls, stayed with me. She'd moved to another state with what was left of her relationship with John. I'd heard through mutual friends that they were already having problems, fighting about money and blame, and whose fault it was that their grand plan had imploded so spectacularly. I wasn't surprised. A relationship built on betrayal and stolen money was never going to be stable. The girls were doing better than I'd expected. They missed their mother sometimes, but they didn't miss the constant tension and drama that had defined our household for months. They liked Lisa, they liked the peace that had settled over our house, and they liked not having to walk on eggshells every day. "It's like we can breathe again," Beau had said one evening while we were making dinner together. That pretty much summed it up. Lisa had officially moved in the previous weekend. We'd talked about it for weeks, making sure the girls were comfortable with the idea, making sure we weren't rushing into something we'd regret later. But it felt right. Natural. Like something that should have happened years ago. "You know what the best part is?" she'd said as we unpacked her boxes. "What?" "No drama. No fights about nothing. No wondering what mood everyone's going to be in when we wake up in the morning." She was right. Our house had become a place where people actually wanted to be, instead of a place where people counted the hours until they could escape. I pulled into my driveway that Tuesday afternoon feeling lighter than I had in years. The business was mine. The house was peaceful. My daughters were happy. I was in love with a woman who actually loved me back. Life was good. That's when I saw Beth's car parked across the street. She was sitting behind the wheel, staring at my house like she was trying to solve a complex mathematical equation. When she saw me, she got out of the car and started walking toward me. "Hello, Gabe," she said when she reached my driveway. "Beth, you're violating the restraining order." "I know, I just needed to see you, to talk to you." She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes were wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. The confident, manipulative woman who'd demanded 2 weeks to find herself was gone, replaced by someone who looked lost and desperate. "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "Everything that needed to be said was said in court. Please, just 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I found myself curious about what she could possibly have to say. "5 minutes. Then you leave and you don't come back." "John left me," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you? Really?" I thought about it. "Yeah, actually, I am. Not because I want you back, but because I never wanted you to be miserable. I just wanted you to be honest." Beth laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Honest? That's rich, coming from you." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you planned this whole thing from the beginning. The private investigator, the evidence gathering, the legal maneuvering. You set us up to fail." "I documented your choices," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you manipulated the whole situation to get the outcome you wanted." I stared at Beth, amazed by her ability to rewrite history even when faced with overwhelming evidence of her own culpability. "Beth," I said slowly, "you cheated on me with my best friend. You used our joint credit cards to finance your affair. You planned to take custody of our children so you could play house with another man. You abandoned our marriage to live with someone else for 2 weeks. I paused. Which part of that was my fault? "You were never there," she exploded. "You worked all the time. You never paid attention to me. You treated me like a piece of furniture that happened to live in your house." "So you decided to have an affair instead of talking to me about it, instead of suggesting marriage counseling, instead of asking for a divorce. You decided to lie and cheat and steal." "I made a mistake." "No," I said firmly. "You made a series of deliberate choices over a period of months, each one designed to betray me while keeping me in the dark about what you were doing. That's not a mistake. That's a plan." Beth stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her trying to find some angle, some way to make this my fault instead of hers. "The girls miss me," she said finally. "Sometimes. But they don't want to live with you." "Because you turned them against me." "Because you turned them against you. I didn't have to say a word. They figured out what kind of person you really are all by themselves." That hit home. Beth's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago, young, vulnerable, and genuinely hurt. "I know I screwed up," she whispered. "I know I made terrible choices, but we had 16 years together. Doesn't that count for something?" "It counted for giving you 2 weeks to figure out what you wanted instead of filing for divorce the day I found out about the affair," I said. "It counted for not pressing charges when I discovered you'd been using our joint accounts to finance your relationship with John. It counted for letting you see the girls whenever you wanted, even though you'd planned to take them away from me. And that's it? That's all 16 years of marriage is worth?" "That's all 16 years of marriage is worth when you spend the last 6 months of it betraying everything we built together." Beth stood in my driveway for another minute, looking lost and broken and completely defeated. Part of me, a very small part, felt sorry for her. But mostly I just felt tired. "I should go," she said finally. "Yeah, you should." She walked back to her car slowly, like an old woman with arthritis. Before she got in, she turned back one last time. "I hope you're happy," she said. "I am," I replied. Finally. I watched her drive away, knowing it would probably be the last time I ever saw her. The girls would maintain some kind of relationship with their mother, but it would be on their terms, not hers. She'd lost the right to be a central part of our lives when she'd chosen to betray us. As I walked up to my front door, I could hear laughter coming from inside. Lisa and the girls, making dinner together and enjoying each other's company. The sound of a real family, not the tense, walking on eggshells atmosphere that had defined our house for months. I opened the door and stepped into my new life. A life without drama, without betrayal, without wondering what crisis would erupt next. A life where people actually wanted to be together instead of just going through the motions. "How did it go?" Lisa asked as I hung up my coat. "It's over," I said. "Really, truly over." She kissed me, and I could taste the future on her lips. A future where trust wasn't a luxury, where honesty wasn't optional, where love was something that brought people together instead of tearing them apart. "Good," she said, "because dinner's almost ready, and your daughters have some interesting theories about why their math teacher might be an alien." I laughed, the kind of deep, genuine laugh I hadn't heard from myself in years. This was what happiness felt like. Not the desperate, clinging to something that was already broken feeling I'd had with Beth, but the calm, steady contentment of being exactly where you belonged. "Dad!" Beau called from the kitchen. "Lisa says you used to be terrible at math, too." "I was not terrible," I called back. "I was creatively challenged." "That's what terrible people say," Bree added, and both girls dissolved into giggles. I walked into the kitchen where my real family was waiting for me. Not the family I'd tried to hold together through loyalty and stubbornness and willful blindness, but the family that had chosen to be together because they actually enjoyed each other's company. As we sat down to dinner, I thought about John's question from weeks earlier. What had happened to me? When had I become the kind of person who could systematically destroy two people's lives? The answer was simple. I'd become the kind of person who valued truth over comfort, who chose self-respect over false peace, who protected the people he loved instead of enabling the people who hurt them. I'd become the kind of person who deserved to be happy, and for the first time in years, I was.